Good evening, everyone. It is with excitement and enthusiasm that I'm here with you this evening. More importantly, I'm proud that Along Walk Home, the nonprofit that I founded many years ago in 2000 with my sister Scheherazade Tillett, is partnering with One World tonight for the virtual launch of Nate Marshall's new book, Finna, and for what promises to be a dynamic conversation between him, poet Morgan Parker, and One World senior editor Nicole Counts. Before I tell you a bit about the work that we do at A Long Walk Home, and even more about how our work supports the vision of Nate and Morgan and the mission of One World's Ideas in Action virtual series, I, Salamisha Tillett, as a writer myself, would like to begin in Chicago, where we are based and were first introduced to Nate Marshall as a poet and his organization, Young Chicago Authors. Originally publishing Riot, a poem in 3 parts in 1969, Chicago's great Gwendolyn Brooks wrote, "It is the morning of our love. In a package of minutes, there is this we. How beautiful. Merry foreigners in our morning. We laugh. We touch each other. Our responsible props and post." In a poem called Riot, one written as her generation mourned the end of the civil rights movement and initiated the dawn of the Black Power movement, she focused on touch, laugh, beautiful, and we. And it is with this in mind, the power of art in general and poetry in particular, that we at A Long Walk Home wholeheartedly believe in as the tool of our liberation and our freedom. Founded in 2003, A Long Walk Home is a Chicago-based nonprofit that empowers young people to use art to end violence against girls and women. We have 2 main programs, Girlfriends, an Art and Activism Institute that cultivates the next generation of African-American girls and young women leaders, and Story of a Rape Survivor, a performance that documents a 20-year journey of healing from sexual assault. A Long Walk Home began with a simple act of sisterhood. My telling my sister that I was raped in college, and Scheherazade picking up her camera to document my recovery. And in that moment, we began to commit ourselves to eradicating the intersections of oppression and recentering those on the margins, and to mobilize Black girls, young women, their families, and their communities against racism and sexism, against state violence and gender-based violence. Hailing from all over the city, our Girlfriends leaders, Black girls and young women ages 13 to 22, have been at the forefront of Chicago's and our country's most paramount social justice movements. Me Too, Black Lives Matter, forging coalitions with the missing and murdered Indigenous and girls women's movement in Minnesota. Whether it is building a public monument to recognize the Black girls and young women who've died because of police violence, like Rekia Boyd, taking over parks and public spaces to commemorate the lives of Black women who've died because of domestic violence, like Jessica Hampton, or launching a movement in Chicago itself on behalf of Black girls who have gone missing or murdered, or even muting R. Kelly himself in his hometown. Our Girlfriends have used poetry, photography, and performance to achieve racial equality and gender justice, and to center Black girls and women's labor, their value, and their visions of freedom. Now, more than ever, in these months of the pandemic and these weeks of protest, we need a freedom movement that is as vast and as expansive, as inclusive and as open as the world that our young artists and activists make, and as Nate, Morgan, and Nicole will create for us here this evening. Tonight, we are all blessed to bathe in the words of these phenomenal poets. We use Morgan's work in our curriculum. We've partnered with Nate in our own poetry writing. And I would like to say that Morgan is a griot of Black women's intimacy, pleasure, secret weapons, and soiled panties. Nate is a sage of riots and rainbows, of the South Side, and Southern phrases like finna. On behalf of A Long Walk Home, our youth artists and activists, their families, and the hundreds of thousands of survivors that we've been able to work with, I would like to give a deep thank you to Chris Jackson and Elizabeth Mendez-Berry for inviting us to share this space today. And I would like to hand over the mic to Nicole Counts. Thank you, and have a wonderful evening.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nicole Counts. I'm senior editor at One World. That is a very hard opening to follow. What a beautiful, beautiful words and sentiments. Thank you so much, Salamisha, for being here and for your work with A Long Walk Home. Before I introduce our two incredible authors, I just wanted to take a moment to recognize all the victims of COVID-19 and all the victims to racial terror in this country, and most specifically those whose last words, unfortunately, were "I can't breathe." So I would love us to reflect on that a little bit throughout the night. So I'm going to introduce each person, and then each of our two wonderful panelists will come on separately and read from their work. So first is Morgan Parker, who is a poet, an essayist, and a novelist. She is the author of the young adult novel Who Put the Song On, and the poetry collections Other People's Comfort Keeps Me Up at Night, There Are More Beautiful Things Than Beyonce, and Magical Negro, which won the 2019 National Book Critics Circle Award. Nate Marshall, who is the new author of Finna, and the author and editor of numerous works, including Wild Hundreds and the Breakbeat Poets, New American Poetry in the Age of Hip Hop. He's an award-winning writer, rapper, and educator, and he is a member of the Dark Noise Collective and co-directs Crescendo Literary. So first up, we're gonna have Morgan come on and read us a poem, and then we'll have Nate come on. I'll turn it over to you, Morgan.
Hello. Sorry. Okay, can you guys hear me? Presumably? Okay, well, I'm hoping so. This poem is long, so I'm gonna start now, even though there's a trillion things I could say to just praise Nate and Nicole and everyone kind of in this space right now. But okay, here's a new poem, so bear with me. It's not even finished yet. See previous. Scroll up to the last time you texted a similar thing in a similar moment. Something like support, solidarity. Just want to say, no need to respond. How are you holding up? Your words have been so important to me. So sad. You teach me, my silence. I am guilty, sorry, harmful in any way. My actions are violence against you. I have committed to ashamed my internalized behavior. I will never know. All I can do is try. Deep violence. I hope you never felt. Sending love. If there's anything I can do, I am listening. I want to. I can be better. Friend, it is 9:15 a.m. In the news today, the cops killed a Black person. I bet. I am 2 zones away, 3 hours behind. I haven't checked the news yet. Today, I haven't made coffee, grumbled about the weight of another day of making coffee myself. Nobody will do it for me. I am waiting to see if and when I shall rise again. A murdered Black woman was unarmed on Wednesday in Louisville in her own home. I can't get over this, her own home. And later I hear she was sleeping. Why are there so many bullets in this world? See what happens, dear Fred. God, this world fells us still, niggas at rest. I am in awe. How could anybody disgrace the precious integrity of my beloved sentences? This is not how things are supposed to work. Some parts of speech unaccounted for. There is no meaning to officers involved. I wonder how they do that, become involved. Over time, it's easy to forget what a sentence is supposed to do, that it is required to do anything. But there are some laws. There are dependent clauses and causes and actors and modifiers and no adjectives, no verbs without nouns. Go back to the sentence diagram. Remember, there's a subject. You know this. There is a direct object. There is not a complex sentence. The sentence is lacking pertinent, crucial information, such as the shooting. Who belongs to the shooting? 8 bullets, forgive me. What a phenomenal manipulation of language. How cruel my life is, this language and what it can withstand. Always remaining evidence of the possibility of unchewed truth. Pigs murder nigger. Pig murders child. Pigs execute sweet babies. President orders nationwide execution of all niggers by any means necessary. But might we offer you a machine gun? Governor says nigger deserves spontaneous. Brat, brat, brat. President issues statement saying all niggers must be killed. Get rid of the Mexicans and China and fags. And did I say niggers die for our country? Just say what it is, how it be feeling like is religious. On Wednesday morning, Brianna was still asleep. They killed her. She has been killed. A Brianna-involved shooting means these guys came into her house, shot until and after she was dead. She was 26. The warrant was for a house 10 miles away. Sure, she was no angel. She was a person alive, was her involvement in the shooting. Verb of a gun. Noun, by these motherfuckers. Subject, we are the direct object. Target, you think we stupid? Another way to say no agent, no regrets. Sorry, whew. My hands are shaking. Another way to say no regrets. Dog ate your agency. Nothing is your fault, but maybe fault was involved. Oh, passive tense, you ain't never done nothing for a nigga. Man, listen. I can't keep up. Is it Friday? What is today? I am still waking up on Wednesday morning and losing all hope in sentences. My Lord, I am awakening. That white poem song. I take my waking slow. I wake to sleep and take my waking slow. I am reading the words now new, and I am beginning to understand. You know how words always arrive, change somehow if you go back? I bet there awaits fresh cut and timely guidance with your continued unchanged inquiry. It's like tarot cards. It is ritual to seek wisdom. I understand again. The poem never wants to wake up. The poem was born to die. Mornings I wake up to still again darkness. The people waking slow, taking centuries to wake woke, and I wake and wait to shut my eyes. This time the poem tells me what it really means. I am waiting to die. I live to be killed. I wake up to this shit again. I wake in the meantime because I am already dead. I wake to please. I mean, actually, what was the nature of your inquiry? I had a feeling, and awake, it is clear I was right. I had a feeling when your notes of encouragement trickled into my bad dream. Are you familiar with this type of nightmare? The one where the hunt is over, the thing has killed off your people, and with every attack you survive, you become more aware of how the world works in this dream. How the story is, eventually you die because it is your turn. There is nothing left but you, reaching out as if to grab and shake my grief awake, non-violently as a friend and ally. You're welcome. Thank you so much. I'm up now. How may I assist you this time? I feel like I wrote this poem already. Seriously, don't you think? I swear I said I feel like this happened before. My feelings on this subject, whichever body, have not changed. There is no advanced course. I have given you everything. Go back to what I wrote already and then move forward accordingly. I know you think you can ignore the first part, the part where you have to do something. I too never organized that drawer where I put all the instructions for things I bought instead of reading what it has to say about itself, getting to know my investment. I just use it, whatever, as long as it does what it's supposed to. When it stops doing what it's supposed to the way I need it to, what I paid for, when it no longer responds to the way I've used it all this time, then we have a problem. That's my money. Somebody must help. Tell me what to do. If, say, a person fulfills the purpose of providing information such as a help desk or moderately useful customer service line, not Spectrum or Optimum, but like Walgreens, even Walgreens, Verizon, and all those guys will tell you automatically, unplug, step back, try again, refer to manual before requesting the attention of a person, a service, theoretically a person laboring. Did this help? We value your time. For profit, unfortunately, it is not possible to serve every consumer at the moment. It's customary and socially righteous to hold please. Think about this for a sec. Maybe your glasses are on your head, you know. The answer was given unto you, and yet, oh God, you refuse me again. Considering a personal complimentary guide to consult in anguish and confusion, beacon times like these, steadfast servants standing by with a pertinent message for times like these, summoned to you like the color of what you know and forgot what to do. Think about it, all that's happening lately. Actually, I've definitely written this book before, already the year before last year. Pretend it's yesterday. There was a poet involved writing, which resulted in the printing of a book of these words already and ever. Another body is a person. It's distasteful to quote oneself, but this is a pre-recorded message. Once something's recorded and printed, it's out there, I think. What's the point in saying the name anymore? The words are already out there. The dead and the magical Negro and the hunted and the mothers and the dead made great patriotic sacrifices for our daily comforts. Sirs, you have to know services can be discontinued. Quality can be compromised by lack of proper care and maintenance. You have to understand consequences. Consider what to do if such a utility gets broken. And instead of trying a complex sentence, consider a simple sentence. Always goes like this: subject, verb, direct objects. And sometimes the object has a proper name, a name. If anything is happening, there is always a verb. Consider that involvement. The predicate is what makes the subject alive. The subject's action determines the life of the predicate. You must admit first, somebody did the verb, right? If we are to admit that the verb cannot activate itself, right? Consider in times like these, the direct object of the subject's verb, and consider going back and consider that maybe, no, admit it, you were involved in the breaking. I'm sorry, it is broken. You broke it. Your protection plan has lapsed. This is our final communication. Thanks, y'all.
All right. Whew. Landless acknowledgement. Before we get started, we would like to acknowledge that we live on some unceded bones. Sometimes me and mine imagine ancestral homes. All I got so far is Montgomery, Alabama. Maybe a boat. Maybe a plot of land somewhere so far from the south sides I've claimed that I would get lost on the way. I admit, sometimes my homies talk about their families immigrating and I get jealous. We lost the land we were custodians over before I was a twinkle in the eye of a twinkle in the eye of a twinkle in the eye. Closest I got to a homeland is my mama's Caucasian pitch on the phone calling the police. Closest I got to a homeland is not never calling the police. Closest I got to a homeland is my daddy's laugh in a spades game. Closest I got to a homeland is my lover's tongue talking or otherwise. Closest I got to a homeland is the funk under a DJ's needle and my hand full of a dance partner. Not to be dark, but I am. Not to be dark, but the planet is on fire. Not to be dark, but they move in capitals because the water is coming up. Not to be dark, but our bones are in that water too. Maybe that's my capital. Once the polar capitals melt and there's a whole lot less land for folks to buy and sell and steal, maybe everybody will feel a little more dark, will feel a little more homelandless like we do. Why you think I call my compatriots homies? Maybe ain't no home, except for how your beloveds cuss or pray or pronounce. Cool. I'll just read one more. This poem is called The Homies Ask If I'm Trying to Smash. Our language for sex, stain, smash, bang, beat, hit, pound. This is where we live. A land of impact and soiling. A gaggle of boys boasting over hurt. Our tongues wagging, stupid flags of a dumb dominion. Our love for each other measured in what we lord over. We, poor timekeepers, consider our preposition here. Bros before. We, anti-historians. We, unmakers of ourselves. We, failures of science and courage. We, ugly. We, ugly. We, ugly. We a bankrupt vernacular, a slang as prophecy, a linguistic imperative towards pain.
Morgan, if you'll join us too. First of all, I was over here writing down some of the words, like I didn't edit the book, and I don't have all these copies of your book, Nate. Also, I wanted to do this when after Salamisha went, but I was just reading this today, my Gwendolyn Brooks. So it's just funny that she quoted it. Thank you both so much for reading for us and for being here. I could say a lot of words, but I'm gonna choose not to and just feel them. I guess I'm gonna start with you, Nate, since your collection, Finna, just published 2 days ago.
Oh no.
We're all so excited about it. So I just wanted you to start and tell us, like, what did you set out to do when you started this collection, when you started writing this?
Oh, yeah. That's a good question. I think so, in a lot of ways, like I started writing this book sort of as soon as the first joint came out. And I think it was a combination of a few things that were sort of happening that I think made the project drive into this direction. So one of them was I was teaching at a men's college in Indiana, and I think just the experience of like being in these spaces where all of my students were cis men, a lot of first generation students, a lot of rural students, and a lot of like urban students, right? It really made me think about like what are some of the things that like young men are grabbing onto to like construct their masculinity, and I became sort of interested in writing poems towards that. But I think the other thing was like kind of touring around and reading from the first book and seeing the way that a lot of non-Black people were ready to read that book is really tragic and really sad. And that deeply confused me because I was like, man, this book is like a lot of fun to me. And so I think out of that, rather than sort of try to respond to that feeling or respond to that I guess set of assumptions, I was like, how can I sidestep that entirely and try to have like a different conversation that is speaking directly to the people that I want to speak to, the Black folks, et cetera. And also, and how do I do that in a way that is made explicit so that everyone else, even if they're like listening in and enjoying the work and like taking something from it, taking a lot of things from it, they sort of understand that they're like overhearing an A and B conversation, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting because, I mean, I'll ask you more about this in a little bit, but so much of Finna and your work in general, you've done so much research on the African American vernacular English, which I won't say that long thing again. So remember that, people. But both of your works, your work and Morgan, your poetry collections, but also your YA and your nonfiction, just because I have the pleasure of reading your nonfiction, is not only infused with, that specific vernacular, but it's celebrating, it's celebrating how our people talk, So I'm curious, what resistance or like challenges you guys have come up against when, wanting to write the way that we talk.
I mean, I think that we're both like language nerds. And actually, me, I feel like I remember when you like already, I was a long time ago, like you hadn't written the book, but like you knew it was going to be Finna. Yeah. And I remember like talking to you about that because I was still working on Magical Negro, and I was thinking a lot about like just archiving our like private, our kind of like, not jokes, but like kind of inside jokes and just like our code words and things like that. And yeah, I think that's something that a lot of our like folks are talking about and thinking about, because that's poetry, but also because, we are writing poetry to a lot of different people. So there's kind of a constant question of like, who am I speaking to, and how, and we've gone to white institutions, so we like understand code switching a lot. Yeah. And I think it's important that you brought up assumptions. Like we're always battling that. Yeah. So I think, I don't know, we're obsessed with words and like how they're used and abused.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I really agree with that. I think for me, and I wonder if I wonder if this was sort of similar for you, Morgan, but certainly one of the things that kind of laid some of that groundwork in terms of just like a more articulated interest in not just like language broadly, but in specifically how like how black folks speak and how that is like a particular kind of tune, right? Was going to college, right? So I went, I'm from Chicago, was like born and raised there. And then I went to college in Nashville at Vanderbilt University. And the thing about going to college at Vandy was that most of the other black students were, I mean, obviously not from Chicago, right? They were from Tennessee, specifically Memphis. They were, or Atlanta and all over, right? And I remember sort of hearing how folks were talking and what folks were doing with the language and recognizing how it was different, right? How like in Memphis, they would call everything a junt, right? In the way that like Philly folks would say like Jean, right? Right. And I was like, what is this junt, right? But then I remember like one of my homies coming with me to back home to visit, and he was like, why is everyone calling me Joe? Like my name is Chris. Like I don't understand. And it's like, oh, it's just what we say. It's like dude, man. Yeah. And yeah, so I think that there's just like I think like seeing that initially like sparked something in me, and it became a thing that I just was interested in like understanding and like playing with and I guess documenting.
Well, what kind of research did
Geographical part. Oh, sorry.
No, you go, Morgan.
The geographical part, right, is like super important to you, and me, and like, you know, and I think that's really what it is. Like the same words can mean something different on a different coast, and all of that stuff is interesting. But I think it would make sense that you would think about the language of regions, if you're already thinking about how do I describe this place, how do I describe this city that is me, that has to do with like what people talk like.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
It's interesting. I feel like Morgan, you and I talk a lot about safety and what or who is deemed sacred a lot. And obviously Nate, I mean, he's literally wearing a shirt that says Chicago. He writes a lot about the sacredness of Chicago and about home. So I'm just curious how, in both of your writing, how do you approach sacred spaces or home, if you want to call it home, or, the city that you love so much? How do you go about representing that in your works?
Daniel?
Yeah, I mean, I guess in some ways, right? Like this notion of sacred is sort of like doing something for me because in a lot of ways, and I don't, I guess, talk about this a lot, but I feel like I wouldn't be a poet without church, right? And the reason why is a couple of things, right? First off, as a kid, like, we went to church almost every Sunday and was like in the choir and all this stuff. But I was this sort of kid that it was maybe like one of the first places where I really got platformed and where I really got to like sit with language, right? So because I was like an able reader at a young age, they'd have me like read the Old Testament reading or the New Testament or whatever. My mom like sent me a card the other day, and she brought up this thing in the card of like when one time for like the Easter play, I was Jesus and they had me like walk on the or they had me like ride on a donkey down. They like blocked off the street for like 2-3 blocks, and they had me ride on a donkey for half the way. And then they made me get off the donkey and had me like carry across, and everyone was yelling at me. It was wild. It was wild. I was like, man, this is like a Nas video. But it was, yeah. So I think certainly like the language of the sacred is really embedded into my sort of DNA as a writer, right? Like King James is like the first notion I had of sort of elevated language. But I think with that, right, one of the things that I've come to see or come to think about is how so many of these like everyday things are sacred, or how like, when you leave home or when you go away from a place or away from people or whatever, the things that you miss are like the small incidental things, right? And those things too hold a kind of like, hold a sacredness, right? So, when I leave Chicago, I don't miss like the big monuments and like the sort of fancy buildings downtown, right? I miss like Harold's Chicken Shack, and I miss like a specific. I miss the one on 103rd and Halsted with like the Malik Yusef platinum record behind the bulletproof glass, right? And how there's like one janky ass like bench and table where you can like sit and eat. Like that's what I miss, right? And so like that to me is actually the monument. That to me is the sacred thing, right? When I miss my partner, right, I don't miss like the sort of like big grandiose things about Allison. I don't miss like her resume, right? I miss like the way that she like touches my arm or something. You know what I mean? Like little things, like little things. So
For you readers out there is a poem dedicated to that specific Harold Chicken Shack. So read the collection. That is, I did not have this question prepared at all, but it's very interesting because I like Morgan, you know, you think and write so much about how the church has influenced you and like how it's helped. I want to say, I think how it helped you, not helped you, but helped define what is sacred to you specifically and like what you can take and stuff. So I don't know if there's anything you want to comment on that before.
I think, you know, I mean, as you're talking about that, Nee, I think the sacred maybe is in the specificity. Yeah, that was one thing I was thinking a lot about when I was writing Magical Negro is like, how do I get to a very specific thing? Because that's where the magic happens. You know, if I say Diana Ross in general, that's different than saying this one photograph of Diana Ross, you know, eating a rib. And I think there's something really, really special about capturing, not only those small moments, but those moments in very specific detail. And because the detail I pick is going to be different than the detail that someone else picks. And that's like the thing that activates, is the very specific. Yeah.
You know, so like, still, I guess, along the lines of sacredness, and actually something that Salamisha had said, and then in your poem, Nate, you know, someone on social media asked a little while ago for a list of Black men who write about Black women with care. And one of the reasons I was so excited about your work, Nate, when I first, you know, really met you and talked about this project was the ways that you were trying to tackle the way in which some men speak or talk to women and the way that they, you know, identify women and things like that. And then, of course, Morgan, I mean, I think all of your work honors Black women, not just because you are a Black woman, but in the way that you like specifically share our experiences. So I'm just wondering how you both approach writing specifically about and for Black women.
Nate's book is super feminist. Like that was the first thing I thought when I was reading it. And I was like, Twitter would like murder me for saying that. But like, I think that book is like, you know, like if all cis straight men wrote like that, then we would be just, you know, in a much better position. Because the thing about it is that you don't, and you know, I know you, so we've had conversations about masculinity and about like growing up as a man and what that means. So I know that you think about it a lot, and I know that you think about it very delicately. But I really, you know, you don't let yourself off the hook in that book, which I think is what makes it really special and like what makes it believable. You know what I mean? It's not like, here's bad, here's good, and like, I figured it out, so go me. You know, it really is like, this shit is dangerous, and I was that dangerous person. Here are some reasons why, but not excuses, you know?
yeah.
So yeah, I love that about your book.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I appreciate that. I like it's hard to sort of speak after that. How I mean, I don't know. I just like I don't I feel like I always say this and it sounds sort of reductionist, but like I really was in many ways like the only boy in my family. And I think that has shaped me in a number of ways, both good and bad, right? So like one of the things about that experience is like there are a lot of ways like as a very young like boy I was sort of placed into the position of man, and that like I think like taught me certain things about like how I have to sort of take a lead or how I have to be a kind of like stoic or whatever that I don't think were positive, right? That are things I have to sort of like I'm still doing the process of kind of like unlearning or deprogramming or just like wrestling with, right? But I think the other thing it taught me about was like I had a constant and very real, and particularly because I have one of my sisters, we're like super close in age, we're like 10 months apart. And so because of that, like I think I've just always had a very particular insight into or proximity in a way that maybe other men didn't to like how like black women and girls just get like wild mistreated. And I think that was just a thing I've always been sort of thinking about. Like, right, like I remember like riding the bus being like, you got like 11, 12, 13 with my sister and seeing dudes like not let up. And it kind of be a thing where like we had to, at a certain point, tell people like I'm her boyfriend and not her brother. Otherwise they like would not stop fucking bothering her. Right. Or, or like, me and my sister still have like our phone numbers are very close. And I remember as a kid, like when a dude would be sort of like pushing up on her for a number or whatever, she just give them my number, So like shit like this. And I think, I don't know, I think like that proximity in some ways has been key. Because it made a lot of things that I think are a lot of sort of suffering that I think is invisible to men, a little bit more visible to me, perhaps.
Has that sister read Finna? And if so,
I think so. I mean, she got it. She like, I sent them like drafts. I sent them like the PDF. Like, I think they all have physical books now, or they're en route.
yeah.
So yeah, I mean, she's definitely like read pieces from it and has read stuff from it, and also like some of the stuff that is particular to like either her experience or the sort of like the like the things that specifically implicate my sisters. I like sent to them because I was kind of like, this is y'all's too. So like, how you feel? And so yeah.
So you both like are concerned about, or your writing is concerned about freedom, or you're writing towards liberation, or both. And this is a selfish question, but I'm curious what freedom means to you, or how you approach writing about freedom and liberation. Look at Nate.
Oh man.
I know
Morgan.
it's a big question.
That's a really large question. Wait, can you say it again?
Yes.
How
Yeah.
do I liberate? Oh my God. Well, Nate's going to answer because Shirley can't last an hour.
Perfect. Yeah, say the question again. Give it to me.
So, I think a lot of your work, both this book and almost everything that you write, I think is concerned about freedom.
Yeah.
Or that you're writing towards liberation. And I'm wondering, either some things that you've learned in that process or what freedom means to you.
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. I think in a lot of ways, the process of making things that imagine freedom have like taught me that I know very little about freedom. If anything, like there are ways in which the writing only allows me to sort of like cross stuff off my list, right? Yeah, so it's almost like a sort of process of elimination practice. But yeah, I don't know. I think part of the reason perhaps why me and Morgan both were like, "Hey," when you asked the question, is because I think that, I mean, I don't know, for like, frankly, I don't really think a black person, certainly in this country, like has experienced freedom and has even really seen it or like really like touched it, maybe in like small moments, right? And I think like, I think about like the potential of love, right? As a certain kind of space of freedom. But in a broader sense, I don't know if it's like a thing that black folks or really anyone like gets a chance to really experience. And so for me, like, yeah, I don't know, writing about it is kind of like a practice of fantasy. It's a I mean, it is like that practice of imagining, right?
And asking the question about what it is, you know what I mean? Like, I think your question is the question that we approach the page with, how can I get a little bit freer by exploring this thing? And I mean, you read my draft, so you know I'm just like, we're not free because they got our minds. And so until everyone understands everything about themselves, and you know what I mean? Like, that's kind of my way of like, how can I extricate their thoughts from mine? That's what I want for all of my people, you know, like just for us to be able to be clear headed. And that's something, it's like, you can't even imagine it, right? So I do think it is, you know, the writing becomes a space to like, yeah, just like test it out. For me, it's often like, can I say this? You know, can I articulate this out loud? Like, what will happen if I do this? So yeah, the writing is just like training toward freedom, you know, just like practicing how to focus and like know thyself, because otherwise we don't have a chance, you know?
Yeah. You know, I as both of your editors in some ways, you know, I think that's the main question I ask when I'm thinking about a book, you know, whether it's beach read, a thriller, you know, serious nonfiction poetry, I ask, is this going to make, like, how is this imagining our future in a way that we're all more free? Because I think the truth is, like you said, Nate, I don't think any of us really know, and I definitely don't think Black people know. But I do think that should be a part of creating, you know, that question and having that in mind. So, you know, that makes me think about imagination and like how we open up our imagination. So, you know, both of you, I mean, Nate is a rapper and Finna is so much, I mean, some of the poems I really like, you just have to read them out loud, and you almost in like a sing song in a way because of the cadence, you know. And Morgan, you know, I know music has like deeply influenced you. I mean, literally your YA novel is who put the song on. So, you know, what were you guys listening to during the process of making your, you know, latest works, or what are you listening to now? How has music shaped your writing? Any of those questions you can answer.
I want to, Nate, I didn't know there was a Finna playlist. So
There's like 4
Good.
from the playlist. There's a lot of them, actually.
well,
Yeah.
let's trade.
Yeah, absolutely.
The Magical Negro one is like pretty intense. It's pretty intense, but yeah, I listen to like exit this current time and space. I'm learning that about myself. I'm like, uncle, you know, I like listen and then it becomes 1976 in my house and I can kind of like think in a new way. Yeah, that's what I'm up to currently.
Yeah. All right. I'll talk about some artists, but first I want to put people on to this there's this like new feature on Spotify that I just used for the first time last night that's very exciting to me, where you can like make a group listening session with like one person or many people or whatever, and then it just like syncs up and y'all are like playing the same things on in your respective places.
Oh, that's cool.
It's very fire. It's like really cool because like this is like
someone is DJing sort of thing.
yeah. I mean, someone can DJ or y'all can trade off or whatever. You can like, just like let an album play. But it's dope because I've like done. I mean, it's like a thing I'll do sometimes with friends where we'll just like put on an album and they'll be somewhere else, but I'll just be like, okay, I'm about to start listening, and then we like text through and just talk about all the tracks. But now you can like
haven't done that with
actually
Morgan
do it.
and I.
Well, hey, look, after
I
this,
know I have no way, but I've done that before with one of the white husbands listening to Steely Dan, but I never got your invite.
damn, look, let's do it. I did that with like Kava Akbar because we were just,
Really?
like, yeah, he like got very excited about Jay Dilla at one point. So I was like, let's just listen to a bunch of albums.
What a
that he
magic
produced.
moment. Like,
Yeah.
that's important.
Yeah, but the one artist, I mean, a lot of Chicago artists, which is perhaps not shocking to anyone. So folks like Jamila Woods, Saba, Psalm One, this rapper named Ad Two. There's this really dope rapper who's a black queer librarian in Chicago on the West Side named Roy Kinsey. And then there's this one song I've been listening to over and over again by this cat named the Philharmonic. And the song is called Pay Me. And it's just like, I'm just like, man, like this is this is like some reparation shit. Like I like listen to that song like 5 times a day.
Here for it.
That's awesome. Okay, I'm gonna ask just, I guess, one other question before I have to open it up to other people, although I have many more questions written down. So Nate told the Random House team that was working on the book that a poem needs oxygen. I'll never forget that line. He said a poem needs oxygen. I wrote that down. And that writing the poem is only part of the process, but that he felt that people should read it out loud, and that the way that you read a poem is the other part of the process. So I'm just curious for both of you guys, how do you intend folks to read your work?
I feel differently about that from each piece.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that is actually a thing I ask myself. And like, anyone who's been my student knows I'm always like, how do you want the reader to feel at the beginning? How do you want the reader to feel at the end? But like, you don't know until it's like taking shape.
Yeah.
And that's different for each, piece.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I feel similarly. I think, I will say, I think if there's anything, the ideas that have been rolling around my head are this. One, I do think of at least my own poems, and I think a lot of poems in some ways are kind of sheet music, right? Rather than like the song. So like, if you're like, yo, put your favorite Beyonce song on, you don't like pull up the sheet music to Single Ladies. You like go on Spotify or YouTube or whatever, and you like play the shit, right? Mm-hmm. And for me, like reading the poem or putting the poem in air, or maybe even just like putting the poem in conversation with someone else, being like, I have to talk to you about this thing that I just experienced, is the thing that sort of kind of makes the poem the poem, right? It's like, it's like, that's like when the oxygen hits the blood and it turns red, right? Like that's what it is.
Yeah, when it goes into the air,
right.
when it like meets another object.
Yeah, because it becomes a different thing, and it becomes a thing sort of out of my control, right? So I can't sort of, I mean, I can have these notions of like, this is where I want the reader to enter the poem and how they should be sort of feeling and thinking about it, and this is where I want them to be emotionally at the end of it. But once I actually hand it over to the reader, I have no control over that, right? Like if there's a poem I wrote as an elegy that's supposed to be deeply sad, and they like bust up laughing at it, then like that's just maybe I didn't do my work well, maybe they're an asshole or whatever, but like that's the effect the poem had, right? And what I wanted really didn't have much to do with what happened.
Right.
I'm going to open it up to audience Q&A.
Sure.
So the first question is, what is something you wish people would notice or ask you about in your work that they usually don't?
That's a good question. I always say like craft, because everyone's just like, as a Black woman, you know what I mean? And I'm like, yo, did y'all see my line breaks? Because I labored over them. Yeah. So yeah, just like the nerdy, like actual craft stuff.
Yeah, I do love when people ask me about like line breaks and punctuation and shit.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I really thought a lot about that.
A lot.
And
there's some slick ones in this book, Nate. I was like,
thank you.
It's also, it's funny because I like know your voice, so I can kind of hear how you would read them, which is differently than how I'm reading it on the page. It's cool to see that, like the difference of the poet versus like this homie Nate. Because it changed.
I know you use like the lowercase I. I think you both use ampersands, not an.
I use and.
Yeah.
I have an ampersand. I don't have a rule about it.
Do you have a rule about it, Nate? Do you only use ampersands?
Yeah, I mostly only use ampersands in poems because I think they just make poems like slimmer. Like they just, they like take 5 pounds off or something. And I think that's kind of, I don't know, that feels useful to me. And I use the lowercase I because it's sort of 2 reasons. One, I think like an uppercase I is sort of like a big typographical thing that like creates a division. And also I think lowercase I is like They just like look like little black boys to me, and so they like make me happy to like have them there.
First of all, that's precious. Oh my god, that's precious.
Aww.
I mean, I remember noticing that about your work and being like, this nigga's bell hooks. Like, what is he trying to do? I mean, but
No.
I think it's because I don't have any like rules about that stuff, but it is, I mean, it's an interesting thing. And I don't know, it changes, to me, it changes some of your poems because it is a little bit like the big I is taking too much space or something.
Mhm.
And that's often the like tone that the speaker takes in your poems. It's like, I'm gonna be a little bit quieter where I need to.
Yeah.
There's 3 more questions. Okay, so from Morgan, like Chicago to Nate, has Los Angeles made it into your writing?
Maybe. Yes, I guess. I mean, I haven't been here for that long. It's more like airports have made it into my writing. That's where I live.
But wait, Morgan, hold on. I feel like this like suburban Cali space.
Yeah.
I mean, at least in the fiction, if not, but I think in the poems too, like that.
Yeah. There's always palm trees about, but my head is often split between like the New York and the suburban, and like it's always been like that since I first started writing poems. So that kind of has a push-pull in the poems. And sometimes I'm like, this is a New York attitude poem, this is a Cali attitude poem, but my poems really aren't, and this says something about me, like they're not rooted in that regionality. I say, I wish I what is it that I said about Chicago? I wish I love anything like people from Chicago love Chicago. Like, I'm like, that is not my attachment to place. But I think it's because like, it's all if you're in California, your people did not sprout from there. You know what I mean? Like it's all migratory, and my parents are from Kentucky, and then who knows before that, So I don't particularly feel connected to place. For me, place is more like environment, which is the built thing. Like the world I have built around me.
As readers, we only get to see the final version. Tell us about the editorial process. In particular, I'd love to hear about some things that didn't make the final cut and why not. Nate, be nice to me.
No, you're good. I'm trying to think. Sometimes like very good things just don't fit. And I'm just like, I don't know. We'll come back to it. Like, I mean, I really honestly don't remember a lot of the poems that didn't make the book, which I guess tells you something about effective editorship. But the only one I really remember is this one that I wrote a few years ago for like friends that were getting married. And I mean, I think it's a lovely poem. I just didn't think it sort of fit like the movements of this particular project. But I guess specifics in terms of like my editing process. One of the things that I think a lot about order, right? I think a lot about the order of the book, particularly like the first couple of poems and the last couple of poems. So like today, a cat I went to college with said he was like on Twitter, and he was like, "Oh, I just been like thinking and rereading the last 3 poems in Nate's book over and over." And I'm like, "Yeah, you fucking right, you are." I'm like, "Yeah, that's what I was." That's the point. But probably the most, maybe the most specific thing about my editing process is that my last edit is that I read the whole book out loud in a single sitting, and I make notes there. But that's like how I know a thing is finished. And if like I have to like do a sort of radical edit or revisioning or whatever, then I sit there and I reread the whole thing again. Maybe not in the same day though, because it's a lot.
What authors have inspired you or influenced your writing style? That one, I'm not gonna lie, it came from my sister, so I had to ask it.
That's cool. What's up, sis? All right. Gwendolyn Brooks is a big one for me. I think Martina Spada is a big one for me. Actually, I'll give you this. So on my office door at the college that I will maybe never see again, I have 4 writers like pictures on the door. Those 4 writers are Gwendolyn Brooks, Phyllis Wheatley, Martina Spada, and Black Thought.
I have a picture.
I almost answered for Nate because like Nate is so Nate. Oh man. June Jordan, Lucille, Zora Neale Hurston was really important to me. Langston Hughes, super important to me. I'm like looking. That's like the tattoos. I'm like just double checking.
That's Brooks right there.
Love it.
Makes me look down at
Wait, what's
mine.
the quote that you have, Nate?
So it's like from Marginalia of like a letter she wrote. I found it when I was writing this play. And it was like a letter in the 80s. Someone was asking to interview her because they were doing a dissertation in like India about her writing and the writing of Langston Hughes. And in it, they talk about like, they say like Negro poetry or something. And this is like the 80s. And so she circles the word and then like wrote, this is her actual handwriting. I like took it from the, and it says, my name for myself and my people is Blacks. And Blacks is all caps with like 3 underlines. So.
I love that.
That's perfect.
Who do you have tattooed on you, Morgan?
Oh boy.
Got a bunch. Iambic pentameter.
Iambic pentameter. Fred Hampton. Langston Hughes, Dig and Be Dug. Star, Shine and Clay. Lucille. Just the word reparations. Harriet Tubman.
Yeah, Tubman.
Zora. Basquiat. Tina Turner.
Look at that, Tina.
Tina as the strength card, as the strength tarot card, just like battling a lion in a tight dress. So good.
Love it.
Those are my people.
Okay, this will be the last question. The line between your music and your poetry feels incredibly fine. This is for Nate, obviously.
Dang.
Why don't more rappers write poetry collections?
That's a good question. Well, one is that a collection of poems is a lot more writing than a rap album or like mixtape. Just as like a matter of words. And so I think that's probably part of it, is that like to do that much I mean, obviously there's other dimensions to like making music, but to do that much writing, you could have like 3 or 4 albums. That's like a single book. And so I think a lot of people probably don't like, or like it makes more sense. Also, like
It's hard.
It's hard. Like poetry doesn't make any money. Also, like there's all this sort of side stuff in the writing that you like when you're an MC, you're thinking about like beat selection, how, like if you're working with a producer and y'all are making stuff together, or you're producing, you're thinking about how you fit in the beat and how you make a sort of compelling like sonic arrangement, right? And that process is like it's related, but it's a very different process than thinking about punctuation and line edit and all of those things that you just don't have to think about as an MC. So, there are rappers who have like published poems, right? So like Mos Def, I think like published something, Yasin Bey, he published something in like the Paris Review. And like other, like I think Common has published things. I mean, No Name has published things. Like there's a lot of rappers who publish here and there, but I think I think it's a little bit of a game of diminishing returns.
Perhaps they do not read enough. That's the other thing. You have to read hella books to write a book. So,
That's true.
Yes.
I think that's a good place to end. So everyone can go and read more books. Thank you both so much for this conversation. I love you both, and I'm just very grateful.
For sure. Thank you.
Go get Finna. It's so good.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Peace, y'all.